Oh, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Guess what I did today? I went down to the Westin Hotel near the airport here in Denver and met a very kind friend of mine, EC Street Preacher, or also known as Philip Brown, who was in town today. Took some time out of his very busy schedule to fly all the way out here from North Carolina, on his way to Louisiana, which is not on the way at all. Very kind of him. To sit down with us and have an interview, and that's where I was today. We were playing the game of Beanboozled, if you've ever seen it. Here's a picture of it here, maybe. No, I don't think I'm going to edit that in, actually. I've cut out all of those pieces for this video, but if you do want to go see us play Beanboozled, go check it out on his channel. Hopefully the link will be down in the description if I get around to that. And you can see us have a quite spirited debate, punctuated by disgusting beans. So go check that out at his channel, and give him some of those views, and tell him what you think of his preaching over there. He's one of the very great American street preachers that is working today out in the field. And but here is the questions and the answers that we gave each other in a very dry format, very boring. But if you want to see us eat disgusting beans, go check it out in the link there. So let's watch. What does the EC stand for?
Okay, at first it was East Carolina, because I was just in the region East Carolina.
Because you live in Rocky Mount?
Well, thereabouts, yeah. And then it was East Coast, because I preached in Charlotte. And then, last year, in November, I preached in California and Oregon. So now it's just extreme Christian.
Nice, extreme Christian street preacher.
Suppose you have somebody come up to you and they say, I got this job, I eat, I sleep, I work, and I'm just going through the motions, and I mean it's just so boring to me. I don't know what to do. I just spin around in circles. How would you counsel that man?
Oh my gosh, what a good question. Came out punching, didn't he? Oh my gosh, I throw him a softball and look what he gives me. Super hard, difficult stuff. I give an answer here and we'll get back to it in a minute, and it's an okay answer. I've thought about it quite a bit since then. And I suppose the advice that I would give now that I've had time to contemplate the idea is to start identifying your own prophets. Start writing your own scripture. You are, obviously, if you can see the flaws in the system, you're a prophet, and it's time to start writing your scripture. You are about to make some inspired writings. Don't stop yourself. But let's listen to what 5 hours ago Mitch said. How would I counsel?
Yeah, they're coming to you with advice and just saying everything's just a monotony for me.
In a machine, they find themselves in a machine, eh? I would counsel that person to follow their passion, I think, is what I would say. I would say, find that thing that awakes your passion and find more of it. What a horrible answer that was. Incomplete. What an incomplete answer. There's much more succinct ways of saying the thing. My brain was not yet up to speed with the type of question that he was asking. He started with the big guns. I sort of eased into it. I stand by most of the rest of the answers. I feel very good about that I gave, and his answers as well. And I think this is a very good debate, and let's continue it. Tell us about your early attempts at preaching. How long ago was it? And tell us about some of your missteps in your early attempts.
Okay. How much time do I have?
Oh, as long as you want. As long as you want. I've got. Yeah. Take your time.
Well, my first preach was Memorial Day weekend, and it was at a strip club, in Rocky Mount. And I went out there and just started my camera. I mean, I made a plea for someone to go with me, but you got to be willing to do it alone. Because a lot of people say, well, street preaching, maybe someday, let me seek God about it, that sort of thing. But I mean, God was very clear to me. This is what you're supposed to do. So yeah, I went out street preaching. I did make some rookie mistakes starting.
Like what?
I remember when I went to the abortion clinic in Raleigh, I forgot to bring my camera.
Mm-hmm.
I did use my phone, and I think I used the phone wrong or something. And I never posted it because the people would have to look like this the whole time to tell what was going on. But I remember that being like one of my really big missteps.
Yeah.
It's just forgetting stuff. And in fact, I forgot stuff. I was going to bring my hoodie to wear that, and I forgot that. Forgot my belt, and these are new pants. But let's hope that works out. What if someone comes up to you and says, I just feel like there's something else, beyond all of this.
More to this?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How would you counsel them?
Oh man, that's pretty much the same question. I feel I answer it a little bit better now, but answered it the best before. It's a very good question. I wasn't yet up to speed, but I gave sort of incomplete answers. So let's watch the rest of this interview sort of uninterrupted. Again, if you want to see the Beanboozled footage, it will be up on his page. He was filming as well. And I think I'm going to do another edit of this with more sort of cutaway shots that Joe was getting at the time. So be on the lookout for that. And please don't make fun of my mm-hms. They find their life to be lacking. They find, I would say, very similar to the last one. I suppose I'm not elaborating on it too much, but I'd say find something you love, go make a difference, go out and change the world for the better in a way that only you can, I suppose. That each of us sees a different facet of this, and go proclaim how you feel. Go communicate to the world who you are and how you feel about it. And I think they'll transcend the monotony, I suppose. If they're stuck in the monotony, if they're looking for something more than just the day-to-day rat race, getting a high score, go out and be passionate. I mean, same answer. Don't feel like I'm elaborating too much, but go be you. As a YouTube preacher, how do you measure your success?
If I can change one person's life, and if I do YouTube videos from here 30 years from now, if I change one person's life, then it's all worth it. That's my success. Suppose someone comes up to you and says, well, look, I've done some really bad things in my life, and I kind of want to make peace, and find some way to get, beyond this guilt and shame that I'm feeling. How would you counsel that person?
I suppose it depends on the severity of of their guilt. If they came to me and said, I've killed a couple people, how do I go about that? I would very much advise them to talk to law enforcement about that. But if it's minor things like or not minor, but less major than murder or things like that, I'd advise them to attempt to make restitution for what they feel they've slighted the universe, and attempt to help others in that position to not make the same mistakes, to find a way to communicate to those that are in danger of making similar errors, and counsel them and share their experience. So I suppose restitution and apology and restitution, and continue or push the other way, clean up others' messes as well, not just their own, but attempt to help others clean up similar messes. So after you film something, tell us about your editing and publishing process. You use a GoPro and tripod here, and tell us how you get your video from creation to publication. Tell us about that process.
Okay, well, I keep my videos very raw, and I'm not being an artist or anything. It's just I'm not very techno, you know. But what I do is I'll take the GoPro home, and sometimes I'll do like a little intro, you know, film a little intro.
Up in your attic or upper room?
Yeah, I got an upper room. Okay, and so I'll plug that into my computer and download them, and then I got this one little app I use and just smushes them all together.
Which app is that? Is that
the Filmora video converter? And you know, if I need to cut something, I can cut it using that. And then I'll just smush them together, and then you know, load up YouTube and upload it from there. And I really try to keep as much interaction as I can. I mean, I only cut stuff out by necessity, you know. But you know, that's one thing I'm very passionate about, is making sure, you know, other people get heard too, you know. I know some street preachers, they want to drown other people out when they're giving their opinion, and I don't agree with that, you know. I mean, this is America, freedom of speech, you know, so I just, you know, sometimes, you know, I'll edit out, you know, if I'm talking to a cop, you know. The other day I had to cut something out because he's like, "Oh, you live here?" Yeah, that's got to go out, you know.
That's nice. That's what I think. No, I agree. Freedom of speech is very much what I'm attempting to explore as well. The idea that as Americans, not just that we can speak our minds, but that we ought to. That speaking our minds is part of the process. Getting out there and telling our opinions shouldn't be embarrassing. It should be, or not just embarrassing, or dangerous, or it shouldn't feel like we're doing something unwise. It should be, when you speak your mind, when everybody speaks their mind, the system works better. And so I'm very fascinated by free speech and all that. Okay,
there's the viewpoint of the Pastafarian religion that it's a satire done by atheists, but then there's atheists that are completely against it. In fact, I saw one lecture that this guy gave. He was an atheist, and he was just railing against, you know, Pastafarianism. I just want to know, what kind of dynamic is there as far as atheism and Pastafarianism?
Well, I get a lot of criticism from atheists. I recently was out on the mall and had an interaction that sort of devolved into a yelling situation with someone who was not interested in conversation, but was there for a confrontation, and so I was able to give them what they wanted, which was confrontation. But I posted that and linked it to a subreddit to get to sort of up the views a little bit, and it worked. I got 2,000 views in the first day, which is a record for me. Yeah, I was happy about that. But most of the criticism came from people who said, "Now, I've not been religious my whole life," or "I'm a lifelong atheist," or things like that, and then telling me what I was doing wrong. I personally am of the opinion that a person cannot be without religion. I think a person who says that they are non-religious is just sort of doesn't have a handle on their religion, whatever it may be. I believe that saying you're non-religious is like saying you don't have a language. I don't think it's possible to be non-religious. We all have sort of gaps in our understanding of the universe, and we put sort of things we'd like to believe in those gaps, mythologies that help us justify the morality that we find. And so I feel like it's healthier to explore our religion, our beliefs, instead of deny that we have them. So when atheists criticize me about how aggressive I am, or how I should be more non-religious, I say that they're losing the fight, that atheists are not
if they aren't part of the conversation, then they are losing the conversation, and so sitting on the sidelines is not an option. And also they're deceiving themselves that they should spend time exploring what it is they believe, otherwise, instead of controlling their beliefs are controlling them, and they are in a very similar position to the sort of the people that I'm trying to awake. Which active YouTube preachers do you... Oh no, I've got two. Which active YouTube preachers do you admire or try to emulate? Or feel like are doing a good job? I know you're going down to meet Lonnie Mathern and Jimmy Miller down there in New Orleans this weekend. Are you're gonna be there for Mardi Gras? You're gonna try to get out to...
Yep, I'm there. The Sober Conference is going on during Mardi Gras, so we'll be in class, or whatever teachers are doing during the day, and then at night we'll be at Mardi Gras. I really admire Reuben Israel, although I'm not just like him. I do have my Reuben moments. When people get really rowdy, I tend to give back what I'm receiving. But I really admire Jesse Morrell too. The way he can just get a crowd within minutes.
He's very good.
Yeah. I'm in awe of that. Because I'll be out somewhere and it might take me like an hour to get one person to talk to me.
Yeah, but you just stand there and go, sin, 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 leaves the hell, hell, hell. That'll bring people pretty good. He's very good at drawing a crowd. Yeah. And
I did do some preaching with the Oregon Jesus Name preacher last year, and we actually went to
the Portland guys.
He's not exactly a Portland guy. He's because they're really radical.
They're aggressive, very aggressive. Yeah.
And he's kind of soft spoken. In fact,
the Portland guys are hell shaking. Is that right? The hell shaking
preacher.
Yeah.
And so they were hating me, but they were saying, "Oh, we like this guy over here talking to him." And he apologized for it. He's like, "I'm sorry." It's like, no, that's a good thing, because I'm leaving in a day or two, and if they like you, they'll keep coming to you and talking to you. But we went to Oregon State, and first time doing a campus preaching, I really like that.
Campus preaching, yeah.
Yeah, because we got a crowd out there pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I just really love interacting with people.
So you like those campus preachers? The vest that I wear is probably inspired by Jesse Morrell. His sort of retro clothes that he wears, I very much do like that. I follow him quite a bit. He's one of my inspirations as well.
Well, tell me about your origins as a street preacher. How you got started?
I was raised Mormon. I went on a mission, the 2-year mission that we did. I went from 19 to 21. I went to New Zealand and knocked on every door in many cities in New Zealand. Talked to a lot of people. I was influential in 26 baptisms, and I then got married to another person who was raised Mormon. We had 3 kids, and it became time for me to sort of decide what I was going to teach my kids. Mormons baptize at around 8. The first thing we do is a blessing for after the birth, and we bless the baby, and we were involved in that. We did that in our faith, and then the next time is around 8. We baptize our kids at 8. So it was my oldest was getting around 8. My daughter was 2.5 years younger, and they were getting to that age where I really needed to decide if I was going to expect them to be part of that faith. And I was thinking about some of the doctrines that we were taught, specifically that it is better to die than to lose your virtue. That a Mormon parent ought to prefer that a child doesn't come home than come home sullied. and I just couldn't, for the life of me, get myself to feel that way.
Yeah.
And I very much didn't want my daughter to be taught that by someone without my presence in the room. And there were going to be a lot of times where she was in one meeting and I was in another, and I wouldn't be able to control what was being taught to her and sort of the things that she learned, and I wouldn't be able to filter that with my opinion about the teaching, and I just felt like I couldn't do those things to my kids like they were done to me. And so I lost my faith in that and had to explore. And as that faith unraveled, it sort of unraveled all the way down to further than I thought it would. And so, but I still felt these ideas of the benefits in my life from being raised religious. They taught very large families, and I sort of felt that I agreed with that idea, that family was a very important value. Music was a very big part of our growing up, and so when I was throwing out the sort of bathwater, I didn't want to throw the baby out as well. So I spent some time exploring what is salvageable about the idea, what religiosity or spirituality means to a human, because we all tend to do it, it seems, and why? What are the benefits? Because there are benefits, and so if I couldn't be non-religious, because that would be denying that I got anything but beneficial from the religion, which I didn't feel was the case. And so, and I had a little bit of theatre in high school, and so sort of my spirituality and emotionality and theatre sort of brought me to desire to explore, and my American upbringing as well, the First Amendment, free speech, and my history of talking about these things because of the mission. So I took all those influences and melded them together as a sort of street performance to invite, and just to invite the conversation to continue, that maybe we don't know everything we need to know about these topics, and we can continue the conversation. All right, in your Super Bowl sermon, you talked about funding and how you didn't need it, but if you got it, you had plans. So tell us about what you would do if you were funded beyond your expectations, and sort of if you would. Have you used any sort of online tools to seek funding? Have you, like Patreon, have you looked into that at all, or any of those ideas?
Oh, GoFundMe and Patreon?
Yeah. And what would you do with it if it...
if I get more subscribers, I might do a Patreon, but I haven't really, money's just not, it's just not important.
It's a distraction from, yeah.
Certainly, you need money to do things, you know.
Do you find it to be very expensive going out normally? Yes, you have a lot of signs. How much do you spend on signs?
Well, I make a pretty good salary, so I'm mostly self-funded. I have had a few people, help me out here and there. But if I had somebody like Trump said, well, here's $1 billion, I'd probably set up a church somewhere, and probably, quit my job and homeschool my kids, because, I don't want to talk really bad about the school, but there was a program they did recently that I wasn't happy with. And people make mistakes, so, don't take this the wrong way if anybody from that school's watching, but I just wasn't very happy with it. But, you homeschool, you have control of what, everything your child is being taught, and to me that's very important. To me, I was never going to put a child in public school. Besides things that they teach that I object to, they just don't teach. On my job, I come across kids, and they're handing me envelopes that say this person doesn't live here, and it says current resident. And I say, what does that say right there? They say, I don't know, I can't read. And they're like 8, 9, 10 years old. I'm like, why can't these kids read? You know.
Yeah.
And I don't know about the public schools here, but I mean, in North Carolina, they're really bad. So yeah, I'd probably homeschool my kids. You know, put up a church somewhere, and if I got just a little bit of funding, I'd probably go to like a Wednesday night, you know, expository type service. But I mean, I can't. You know, I wouldn't need funding for that. You know, at least because you know right now I'm doing overtime. You know, and I'm like, to me that's not an important thing. You know, I just because you know I can do the ministry without money. You know. It's just expanding it.
Right.
I would need money for that, so that's not really, you know, a big priority to me. You know. So how do you measure success as a street preacher?
I review my because like this recent one that I had was a fella came up to me and I said, "Do you believe in the Bible?" He was obviously drunk. He was day drinking and he was probably didn't have a place to sleep that night, and so he seemed to be confronting me instead of conversing. And I posted that, and everyone, you know, of course, said that it was nonsense, and I shouldn't be doing it. And so for that one, I reviewed my performance, and that's sort of how I measure whether I was successful, was whether in the moment whether the things that I was saying were honest and to the point. So I suppose I'm not really thinking about. I do enjoy views. I like that a lot. I have a Patreon page where I'm asking people to go to, and that's been sort of stuck at the very low bar for a very long time. And so I try not to think of those too much as a measure of my success. But whether or not whether or not I can communicate about the points that are brought up, whether or not I am educated in the ideas that are part of these conversations, and whether the points that I'm making are salient, whether they're valuable, whether they're progressing the conversation. So I suppose it's just if I look at it, and a lot of my old videos are very sort of they're more about the show, like the how animated I am or whatever is sort of embarrassing. And so I suppose I measure my success by whether I find what I'm saying to be repetitive, something I've said before, or to the point, I suppose. Because I can't use views yet as a measurement of a success. So we got to,
same here.
Yeah. How many followers do you have at the moment?
I have like 83.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. That's cool.
I wouldn't call them followers though.
Yeah. Acts 2:24 says, all the believers were together and they had everything in common. Do you believe that the apostles were communists?
In that sense, yes, they were communists. And one point that a lot of people miss is that, and that has been a doctrine that's been presented, is that everybody needs to do this. You know, they need to get all of their possessions to the church, and then the church decides who gets what. But a lot of people don't read more into Acts, and you find out that Paul is actually getting donations for the believers in Jerusalem. So it didn't work. The communal system didn't work. You know, it was a complete failure. So Paul's got to, you know, go out and get money for them. So yeah.
Mormonism was very similar. They attempted a very communal kind of idea, and they attempted it about 3 times, and it didn't work very well.
I do have an addition to that. In more recent time, and not very recent, but you know, when the first pilgrims come over here, they tried the communal system, and they almost starved to death. You know, the Indians had to help them, or you know, that would have been the end of them. But they changed and said, okay, we're going to give everybody a parcel of land, And what you make is what you have. We're not going to do communal. And they flourished. So, yeah, it's been proven by history to not be a good system at all.
Why do you think the apostles attempted it?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's good that they got together. It's good that they wanted, to give more, to the church and that sort of thing. I think it was a little misguided, at that point, particularly at that point, because there were so few.
Yeah, very difficult, very utopian.
Yeah, but I mean, they learned from it, so it ended up being pretty good. What attracted you to the Pastafarian religion?
Its lack of rigidity. The dogma that we have, the one dogma, is that we have no dogmas, and I find that to be an invitation to explore sort of exactly the things that need to be explored. In my previous faith, which is like I said, Mormonism, and Mormonism's as Christian as they want to be. We can sort of, there's a lot of that with high focus on the Bible, high focus on Christ, and a lot less to do with the sort of the Joseph Smithy parts of it. But the major problem that we have is that, or that the Mormons have, is that you can't effectively criticize at all from inside. You've got to. It's sort of a patriarchy, a top-down sort of model, and there's that values obedience over personal revelation, I suppose. And so the dogma of the Pastafarians that there is no dogma, the only dogma we have is there is no dogma, sort of illustrates the danger that I saw in the rigid systems that we have. That idea that if you have an argument, bring the argument, and we'll talk about it. And however you resolve the argument is how you resolve the argument. You're not going to be condemned for it. We're not going to point to the commandments and say, well, you're wrong here and here, and so you're disfellowshipped. There is no Pastafarian who can tell me that I'm not a Pastafarian. Whereas there are quite a few Mormons that can tell you you're definitely not a Mormon. And so just the inclusiveness, I suppose, the inclusiveness and its desire to explore the new is sort of without and because atheism was very attractive as far as something to declare myself, but it doesn't. The idea that you're an atheist, it doesn't bring us anywhere. It's just sort of a criticism and then trying to escape the game, and like, I'm not part of that. But I am. I'm very spiritual, I'm very emotional, I'm very interested in the hive mind or the higher intelligence that we are part of, or whatever. And I believe that that there is conversation to have on the religious level, instead of saying all religions are wrong, I'm done with religion, I'll never talk about it again. I feel like that's just as dogmatic as the sort of thing I was criticizing about the religious culture that I was raised in. Yeah, it was very inviting, very open to new ideas. Paul said, he's headed from Jerusalem to Damascus with, who is he with? His companions, I suppose.
Yeah, there were some people with him.
Yeah, I don't think he names them. Mm-hmm. And he heard someone. How can we be sure that he was being contacted by Jesus and not the adversary? How can we be sure who he was listening to?
Well, you can see a change, you know. I mean, to classify the entire experience, you know, the light comes down, and he hears a voice. He doesn't know who it is. You know, the voice has to, you know,
identify
itself. You know, I'm Jesus who you're persecuting. You know.
Why do we believe that voice?
I mean, there is kind of a knowing. I mean, that's one of those things that I don't think you can empirically state. You know, we know this because of this. You know, that's why the scripture says, you know, test the spirits. You know, if you think you're hearing from God,
what are those tests?
Well, what I usually do, you know, if I think I'm hearing something from God and there's some kind of doubt in there, I'm going to meditate on it. And I'm going to, you know, search the scriptures, and I will deliberately call out, you know, say, okay, you know, Jesus, is this from you? Because, and then you can stand on those promises, you know, where Jesus says, you know, my sheep know my voice. And but yeah, the devil is very tricky. He can, in my experience, he can sound just like God.
Yeah, I think there's a few scriptures that speak of that as well, angel of light and things like this.
Yeah, so yeah, you definitely have to test the spirits, as the scripture says. And I think once you see the change in Paul's life, you know that wasn't the devil. You know, because the devil would just say, well, you know, go back to persecuting Christians, because he was doing a lot of good work for the devil at that time, you know. I mean, you know, voting for people to die. He was, he guarded the clothes of Stephen while they stoned him to death. And he was even torturing Christians to make them blaspheme. You know. Yeah,
he was in early Acts, he was very prominent.
Yeah, the change was so dramatic that it took a while for the apostles to accept him. You know.
Yeah, he and Peter had quite.
And there was a huge backlash. You know, I mean, he didn't even make it out of Damascus. They had to lower him out of a basket,
right?
Because they were trying to kill him. I mean, right from the get-go. You know, when he first started. I think anyone that has that kind of revelation, that kind of experience, I mean, you can tell if there's a definite change. You know. I mean, people say, you know, something's different about him. You know, now. I mean, if you had met me 5 years ago, you probably, you know, I'd be totally different than I am now. And I mean, if you told me, well, you know, 5 years from now, you know, you're not going to be, you know, watching TV shows, you're not going to be watching movies, you're not going to be playing video games, and you know, you're going to be out street preaching. I'd say you're crazy.
Yeah.
There's no way. But you know, I just had that experience, you know, 3 years ago when God just poured out His Spirit on me. I know I'm getting to my testimony now.
It's fine. No,
but yeah, He just poured out His Spirit on me, and it was such a beautiful experience. But at the same time, I saw, you know, how ugly my sin had become. And, you know, because it's not like I was an atheist then, but I wasn't being a very good Christian. I was backslidden, and I just saw how ugly, you know, everything was. But at the same time, you know, God I poured out His Spirit on me, and you know, He could have been very justified in saying, well, you know, you just stay in your sin, you know. But you know, when I had that kind of experience, I just said, you know, I said, God, whatever is getting between me and you, you know, I just got to keep having this, you know, this communion, this fellowship, this relationship with you. I said, whatever's between me and you, I said, just show it to me, and I'm going to get it out. And that's when, things started breaking off. So how do you see the relationship between Mormonism and Christianity? Because some people say, well, you know, Mormons aren't really Christians.
Yeah, I've heard that argument quite a bit, and I don't think it holds water. I think that when I was a member, I think that their dedication to the idea of Christ was pretty paramount. I do believe that Joseph Smith specifically, and Brigham Young, and maybe a couple other people were not worthy of even listening to. But I believe that the system that they built was capable of focusing on the traditional Christian values, the idea of Christ as Redeemer, Christ as Savior, intercessor between us, and the only way to. I believe that they are very good at saying that Christ is the solution to sin. That he will bridge the gap between the imperfect and the perfect. I think that is the sort of important idea of Christianity. Love God, love your neighbor. And I think they were pretty good at teaching it. There were, some other things in there as well, but I don't think that there were more or less than any of the other major denominations out there. As far as the added scripture, I think that I don't think that the idea of scripture is as rigid as some of us make it out to be. I think out of the 66 books of the Bible, I don't think that there are only 66 inspired books. I think you can get inspiration from a lot of places. But as far as the division between Mormonism and Christianity, I think they're not further than, say, Catholicism. I think Catholicism has taken it pretty far with the veneration of Mary and the saints and things like that, and the very large, have you been to the Vatican? It's quite opulent. It's quite sort of seeming to have lost sight of the very core ideas that Christ was teaching. So I think they're as good as any other denomination at focusing on Christ. I believe that the argument that they're not Christian sort of avoids the important ideas and gets stuck in semantics. I think it's sort of a semantic idea. But as far as Mormons being positive people who desire a positive change, I think that their religion does help them value that and progress those ideas. But as far as do they worship things that are unworshipable, yeah, there's. But I believe I'm not sure. Personally, I don't think that there are any Christian sects that really. I think it's the sectarian idea that divides us. I like the idea of the body of Christ. We are the body of Christ. We are cells in His body. That we are, part of His finger. Like, not think of Him as a person, but think of us as the here I am right there, and here's you, and this is Him. And I think that they were just as good as any other sect at teaching that. I find them to be a very American religion. And I think the iteration of religion is beneficial. I think they added, they were able to bring the focus to some things that matter, but just like all the other sort of corporations, they get distracted by that. They become a hierarchy, and then they're protecting themselves, and they hire lawyers, and they're advertising on the same billboards as Nike and McDonald's, so they're just another corporation in the end. But I think they all are. I think the Pope is that. And I think it's very hard to avoid that. When too many people get together, we form systems, and then those systems take over. So they're as Christian as Baptist, Southern Baptist, or Wesleyan, or any of these other sort of ideas. I think excluding them from the Christian family is non-productive. If the American money had the phrase Allahu Akbar on it, as well as the In God We Trust, Allahu Akbar, how would you feel about that?
Have it on the money?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good one.
Thank you.
That's a very good one.
Thank you.
My personal opinion is I don't think we'd probably be here, right now. Mm-hmm. If somehow that got changed.
Not changed. It has it as well. Both In God We Trust.
Both of them on there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you still participate in the American financial systems?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it might have an effect on the country. That probably wouldn't be great. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I definitely, I definitely still use the money. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, when I preached to Muslims, they gave me a Quran, and I took it, and I'm in the process of reading it, and they specified, we want you to take care of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some street preachers, they get a Quran, and the first thing they do is they tear it up and burn it or whatever, and I believe a man's got to be true to his word. So I said I'd take care of it, so I do. And I don't have any problem with Muslims at all.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a problem with Islam.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I go out and I speak to them, because I care about Muslims. And I believe there are Muslims out there that are completely tolerant, they are completely peaceful, and they wouldn't, when they see what ISIS and these people are doing, they're just horrified by it.
Mm-hmm.
If you saw my recent videos, I was criticizing that sermon that was given last year, where the guy was talking about a hadith that talks about killing Jews, and I confronted them about that, and they weren't very quick, but they did put out a statement that said, we don't agree with that. This person, he's not an imam. I'm not sure, but I don't think it was even done in a mosque.
Mm-hmm.
It was a taped sermon that was posted for a while and then taken off. But they were the place where I preach at. They were quick to say, "Well, look, we don't believe in this. We've counseled him, and he's expressed regret that it was taken the way it was." So, that's just my feeling on the point,
Mm-hmm.
And we are in a country where it's freedom of religion, And I don't think it'd be a good idea if Christianity or Islam or anything was made a state religion,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's and that's not what the founding fathers wanted.
I agree.
I saw an interview between a Christian and a Mormon,
Mm-hmm.
and the Christian brought out how black people were once viewed.
Yes.
In the Mormon religion,
yes.
And the whole thing about polygamy.
Yeah.
And how that changed, and the Mormon's response was, well, this was the feeling of the church at the time.
Right.
So God allowed that change, but
Right.
it wasn't God changing his mind. It was just God was allowing that. So I just want to get your thoughts.
Yeah.
on that.
Well, I think that idea goes back further as well. That slavery has always been immoral, and I think I think the idea that we create God in our image is much more true than the idea that God created us in His image. I think if there is a creator, that He is less communicative than we want Him to be, and we fill in the gaps with ourselves, and that our morality has been iterating over time. That Abraham had multiple wives and multiple servants, and Paul told the slaves to obey their masters, even if they're bad masters. It's better for a slave to be obedient to a bad master than disobedient at all. And I think that perhaps at the time those things weren't as immoral as they are now. And Brigham Young said that there's doctrines in the Mormon idea from a long time, well, not a long time ago, a couple hundred years, that the reason for the exclusion of our African brothers from the priesthood was because they carry the mark of Cain, and that God is attempting to save those people who are unmarked, and then after they're all saved, then it's their turn. I think Brigham Young said something very close to that. And the idea that the argument that the Mormon leadership of the moment is using is that they were speaking as individuals and not for God at the time, although personally I believe they were using the language to evoke their position, and they were speaking for God. But I believe that everyone is sort of guilty of that idea, and it's okay to have. I don't believe that Revelation has ever been completed. I don't think we ought to expect a perfect morality from at any point in our past. That we have been iterating this idea of morality and what it means. And slavery was acceptable at some point, and when did it become unacceptable is sort of the question, because Moses didn't have a problem with it, the Old Testament didn't seem to have a problem with it, and when Christ was around iterating his ideas, he didn't say anything about the absolute immorality of owning another human. And I think that failing of the Mormon Church is real, and they were slow to fix it. And I think that when our religious systems value tradition over morality, that is a very strong strike against them. And they did lose quite a bit of membership when they switched over, and they lost quite a bit of membership before they switched as well. In the 60s, there were quite a lot of high-level Mormons that were counseling the apostles to change their stance on it. And the thing that I find to be most interesting is that when the stance was changed, when in 1978 they decided that they would allow people of African descent to hold the priesthood and to enjoy the blessings of the temple, as they say, that they didn't. There was no apology as well. There was no. These systems that we have, especially multi-generational systems, are very bad at acknowledging when they're wrong, apologizing, and correcting it as soon as possible. I just feel like they're very bad about it, and that's sort of. And I feel like a lot of churches are going through a very similar idea right now with homosexuality and sort of the sexual morality ideas that are at the forefront of the public conversation at the moment. I think the way that the Mormons are treating the homosexuals at the moment, I find to be very reminiscent of those things as well. But most specifically, I find it to be frustrating that there is they are incapable of admitting how wrong they were. They change the policy and then pretend like it wasn't a big deal to begin with, and nobody should have been as upset as they are, and so I find that to be duplicitous, and I find no value in how entrenched they are, and the idea that we're right over the idea that we're moral. I find that people would prefer to be right, and that's we all of our systems sort of are subject to that weakness. I think the difficulty in owning our mistakes, I suppose. In the letter to the Corinthians, it seems like Paul is talking about a previous letter he wrote to the Corinthians, and then at the end he says, or sometime in it, he says, take this letter to the Laodiceans and read it to them, and have them read the letter.
Is that Corinthians or Colossians?
Colossians, is it?
Yeah.
All right. But he talks about the, Colossians, Colossians 4:16, he talks about the Laodiceans and the letter he wrote to them. If we were to find something that claimed, or not claimed, but seemed to be zero Colossians or Corinthians or Laodicean, Paul's letter to Laodiceans, how would we how would we determine the authenticity of it? How would we determine whether or not it was inspired writing or not?
Well, if you found one manuscript, it would be very suspicious.
Well, that's what we could expect
Yeah.
from the Laodiceans, is that it didn't get as well distributed. So if we found a cache from around the right time and it had a letter that seemed to be that, and then it didn't get out of obscurity, we wouldn't expect to see the manuscripts from the extra centuries, from centuries past, like 3rd or 4th, when the Bible was rather standardized. But how would we determine if it was? Like, not by number, for it was lost pretty early, but if we found a cache of very early Christian writings and there was a letter that seemed to be a letter to the Laodiceans, how could we tell?
Well, I mean, I think that it does go to them. We found over 5,000 manuscripts, and that's the New Testament we have today. So if you did find this one that was not part of any of the other 5,000, and if you switch to other languages, you got over 20,000.
Yeah.
If you go to like Latin and Greek, Latin, and you got over 20,000. And then you find this one manuscript. I mean, that makes it very suspicious. And I do believe, though, and it's a common belief, that what we have today is, it's God inspired. And I mean, there have been other writings that have been put forth, like the Gospel of Thomas, which
There's a gospel.
very, very weird.
Yeah.
Very weird gospel.
They found a Gospel of Judas recently
Yeah.
in the things, and that's quite trippy as well. But the question sort of is about why do we believe that Revelation is inspired? Like what each of those books? How do we know that each of them is inspired writing? What is the idea that it's already in the Bible? Is that how we can tell? Or?
Well, the myth is that the Council of Nicaea got together and they said, well, we're going to do these characteristics, and that the books that are with these characteristics, we're going to say that's part of the canon, and the other ones we're just going to throw out. That's not exactly what really happened. The early fathers, when these manuscripts are going around, the early fathers would often debate upon themselves. Well, should we have this one in the canon? Should we have this one in the canon? So,
right. So
this was like
what
leading
sort of
up.
values
Yeah,
were they using
yeah.
for
This was kind of leading up, to the Council of Nicaea. So this was something that had been discussed for decades even.
Yeah.
Before the council got, and the council just put their stamp of approval on it.
Right.
Said, okay, this is the canon.
Because that was what was the Caesar who did that? What was
That's Constantine.
Constantine? Yeah, Constantine was influential in that, right? Because that was in Constantinople, right, or around there, the Council of Nicaea.
Yeah. So that's the mistaken idea today. It's like, well, we got this canon, but a bunch of guys got together one time and said, okay, we're going to make this a canon, this isn't. But this was actually being discussed, when those writings first began, and they started being, passed around, and, people were, asking themselves, well, how, should this be in the canon? Should we have this one? Should we teach from this one? That sort of thing. So that discussion had been going on, and then, Nicaea just said, okay, well, yeah,
Right.
we've got it.
But it would be valuable, though, to hear what Paul had said to the Laodiceans. It seems
I'd be very interested. If there was a manuscript found.
Yeah. What would you? Well, I mean, it is your turn if you'd like to ask a question.
I'd like to handle the slavery one, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. When people think of slavery, they're thinking, okay, you own somebody. It's like what happened here.
Well, how about
which me
Old
was an
Testament?
abomination. Which me is an abomination in the sight of God. What happened here with the African Americans. I really don't do the race
The
thing.
cotton plantations
Yeah,
and things like that.
I don't believe in race. Technically, the Bible doesn't teach that.
We're all from Africa.
But well, I believe we're all from Adam and Eve, but
Yes,
that's
we
another
all
question.
came off the boat. We all came off the ark.
Okay, so the slavery in the Old Testament was very different than the slavery that we had here in America before, because people were seen as property. They were mistreated, and there really wasn't a whole lot of penalties for mistreating them. In the Old Testament, how you got into slavery was you owed somebody some money, or you wanted them to loan you some money. So you say, well, okay, I'll work for you for this amount of time. It's more kind of like an indentured servitude.
There was that. That's
So we had, and so you would say, okay, well, I'll work for you, for this amount of time. But that slave did have the option of saying, when it was time, when their time was up, which was usually either the Sabbath or Jubilee.
the Jubilee.
Yeah. They could say, well, I want to stay here, and then
Right.
they
all their ears.
Yeah.
Right.
Slaves in the Old Testament could own property. Like I say, in the Jubilee, they would get their property back. If you beat a slave in the Old Testament, you had to let them go. And then what I mentioned, as a loan, if you felt like they paid, and if they beat them and they left, then they lose their money.
Right.
So slaves were definitely treated better. Like I said, they weren't seen as property. It's more like like with the military. When the military offers the GI Bill, which I had the privilege of being able to have.
That's excellent.
Yeah, which was very, very good. When you're in college, I mean.
Did you find it to be, just as an aside, I've talked to, I have no military experience, but I generally find people to be sort of not happy with, a lot of the people I find have felt like the promises weren't kept. Do you feel like America has kept its promises to you?
To me, yes.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm very glad about that.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't qualify for the loan repayment, so they didn't really pay for my schooling. But having that GI Bill come in. Yeah. Because when you're at college, I mean, you're broke.
Yep.
I mean, you're broker than broke.
Yeah. Try having kids in college; it's even worse.
And I mean, that GI Bill was just that was so great to have that. But I mean, that's sort of like what the Old Testament slavery is like, So okay, we'll pay for your, we'll pay for your school, we'll pay you while you're in school, and in exchange you'll be in the military for this many years. You had to do a certain amount of years.
Right.
After that.
A tour? How is it called a tour? Or it's only a tour if you leave the country.
Yeah, tours were when you left the country, but.
All right.
I don't remember exactly how long. I think it was at least. Well, I was in for a while. I was in for like 8 years, but
that's amazing.
I think it was
that's cool. Stateside mostly.
Yeah, at least a few sides. Yeah, I didn't. I volunteered to go to Somalia, but they didn't let me go, which I guess was God's protection.
Well,
because Somalia didn't turn out very well for us. So, yeah, I'm glad I didn't make.
That's
they didn't take my offer on that one.
Well, your service is most appreciated. Thank you very much. Yeah. Any other questions for me, or pretty good?
Yeah.
Cool.
Pretty good.
If you found yourself in a position where you knew that heaven wasn't an option for you anymore, let's say that in your previous life, before you really cleaned it up, you had done something that was unforgivable. Let's say that you had sinned against the Holy Spirit, or found that you had committed a murder that you think was unforgivable.
Okay, had to change the battery there, but
yeah.
He was asking a question, so we'll just
that's
ask it again. So.
Yeah. From what you were saying, you had a sort of road to Damascus moment, sort of reawakening to your faith. If after that moment you realized that there was no, from something that you had done before that moment, that there was no chance for heaven for you, that you are hellbound. That maybe there was a sin in your past that is irreconcilable, but you still have that Damascus moment. You still have this belief in deity and Jesus Christ, but no chance to get into heaven, no chance for redemption. How would you behave differently? Would you still behave as you do now, or what would you change? What would be different about your life than how you're living today?
Well, I mean, that's kind of it's kind of a weird question.
It is, because I mean, we're all redeemable, but if you looked back and said, well, back when I was a non-believer or a light believer, I've committed those 7 murders, and I really don't think that I am worthy of forgiveness, but I still do believe in the divinity of Christ and His power to forgive my family and those around me, and that other people are heaven bound, but not you specifically. There's no reward for you after this life. What would you change? Or what would you change? How would you be living differently from how you are now? Would there be a difference? I assume that there would not be a difference, because it's not the reward really that we're striving toward, but the reality of the gospel that we preach that motivates us. That's what I would expect. But would you expect much difference in how you would live if there was no reward for you in the afterlife?
Well, I think there is some kind of benefit to doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because God's warning against sin is not just I'm going to strike you down. I mean, it's like sin is the problem. Sin is why people are the way they are. I mean, if you do something bad like murdering somebody, I mean, you're going to end up in jail, and there's all kinds of sins like I used to drink alcohol, and I was an alcoholic, so of course there's a lot of problems with that. And I think there is some kind of benefit to living holy and living the right way. I mean, like I say, that's kind of a strange question.
But I believe you answered it. I believe your answer is that there is benefit to living a righteous life, even temporarily, even if there is no chance for heaven. There still is benefit to living how you are, because of its temporal benefits. I think your answer is very good. I think it's kind of what I expected. Let's see. Anything else? How would you respond to the test of Abraham if you had a dream and God came to you in your dream and asked you to sacrifice your child to Him? How would you respond to that test?
That's always been an interesting subject, because people, and particularly when you see movies where God tells Abraham, and Abraham's just like, oh, why do I have to do this? All these pagan gods do this. Why do I have to do this? But there's no scripture behind that. It says, God says, okay, sacrifice Isaac.
Yeah.
And
he woke up and he was on his way the next day.
On his way the next day.
Yeah.
So we're like, well, why? And that's why he's heralded as the father of faith, because he believed, after all those years, and then the promise comes, and then God tests him this way, and he passed the test, and people say, well, why how could he do that? You get the answer in Hebrews, and I'm gonna try to look it up.
Sure. Yes, because I believe I would fail that test quite miserably.
I mean, I do believe he'll test us, but I don't think he'll test us beyond what we can bear.
And the Quran tells the story a little bit different. In the Quran, he asks his wife, he explains to his wife the dream he had, and she counsels him to follow. So I find that to be an interesting perspective.
Okay, Hebrews chapter 11. By faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called. accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence he also received him in a figure. So Abraham's thought then was, well, God's going to raise him from the dead.
That if he's asked me to do it,
If I kill him and I burn him up, God's just going to bring him back.
Would you have that much faith, do you think, or?
I'd like to say I had that much faith. I mean, I hope I don't get tested that way. I mean, I've faced some pretty rough tests lately, but yeah, I mean, you really have to. I mean, Jesus said, you got to be willing, to turn your back on, and this journey that I've taken to becoming a street preacher. I mean, there have been some casualties along the way, as far as there was a cousin that I was very close to. In fact, we roomed together a little bit in college, and we kept up, and I mean, he just totally cut me off and just says, you're stupid, and I can't believe you're doing this, and you're going to lose everything. Even though you've just been promoted, you're going to lose everything. I mean, I'm living the best life I can right now. But I lost him, and had a hairdresser that just went crazy when I said, I don't believe we're born sinners. Show me a scripture. Jesus said, hey, the kingdom of heaven belongs to these. You have to enter. And he said, let the children come to me. He didn't say, hey, keep those sinners away from me. So I believe, and even Paul said, children are holy. So, and she just went crazy about that, and I just said, okay, I guess I won't get my hair cut there anymore. My wife cuts my hair now, so I get it done for free. But yeah, there have been casualties along the way. I mean, you got to expect that, though.
Yeah. Yeah, he did say he's going to, all families will be fighting about his doctrines. When there's 5 together, there will be 2 against 3 or 3 against 2. Well, I think that's very good. Extreme Christian street preacher. Thank you very much for this interview. It's been quite.
Wait a minute. I got gifts for you.
Oh, sure.
I've got gifts.
Excellent.
First thing, this is a printout of legal rights of street preachers.
Oh, excellent.
I don't know if you've run into any problems with police.
Try not to. I generally try to listen to them, but I feel like I'm getting a bit more sort of grumpy.
But these will tell you what your rights are.
Excellent.
And the court cases.
Excellent. Wonderful. This is lovely. Thank you so very much.
We're having trouble in North Carolina right now.
Yeah.
Because they keep saying you have to have a permit, which you don't.
I've got.
And they're limiting, amplification.
Yeah, I saw that in Houston. Someone was doing a live thing, and they came up and said, "Please don't use the amplification." I don't use personally. I don't use amplification because I just don't have the extra hands for it. I use generally. I have this here, so it picks up everything I want to hear, and the yelling is enough. But there is something that I found, but it's just sort of a local thing that says that I'm only not allowed to do it if there's like 40 or more people. I wrote it in here somewhere, I can't find it. Thank you, this is very good. This is very nice. I will look up many of these.
And I got you a book.
Excellent.
This is Leaving Mormonism. This is a book, sort of a compilation of different scholars, and why they left Mormonism and sort of their testimonies about that.
Yeah, we post-Mormons, they call us anti-Mormons, and I'm not anti-Mormon, I'm anti-Joseph Smith. But we have kind of a community online, and we are very sort of close cross-pollination of ideas. This is great. Thank you so much. I didn't bring you anything. No, I didn't. But this has been quite a pleasure. Extreme Christian Street Preacher, thank you very much for coming to town. We very much appreciate you taking your time and
I had a great time,
and the expense to fly out of your way here. It's been quite wonderful. Thank you.
I came here kind of wanting to know, more about the Pastafarian religion.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully I've answered any questions that you have, and of course, if you, I'll be watching any videos if you want to sort of ask any more questions. I'd love to respond to any of those. It'd be wonderful, because I do believe that especially we who are sort of exercising our opinions on the street, that we're sort of in the same boat. I can definitely see that people not being interested in talking to me, but I really would like to speak to Jesse Morrell and Lonnie Bethune and all the people that are very Angela Cummings, you know her and all. I would love to speak with her, but just because this is a great American tradition. It's been going back for a long time. Christ spoke in the streets, and Jonah and Nineveh. It's a human desire to go out and condemn the sinner. But thank you very much for your time. It's quite pleasant, and hopefully you didn't find it too. Because yes, I'm definitely not here to yell invite people into traps or anything like that. But no, this is wonderful, and this is going to be a great video. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I like the fact that in this country, we can get together and talk about, our faith with each other, and
right. I think
nobody gets beheaded after it,
Right.
I think that's great.
Right, and I think that is wonderful. And I think that the First Amendment does challenge us to do that, not to decide what our position is and then keep it to ourselves and ignore everybody else. I don't think that's what the First Amendment is trying to foster. I think it is trying to foster a public conversation about it, and I think the street's a great place to do it, because all these people around have got to sort of be aware that this is a conversation that's happening. This isn't a closed conversation. It's not just for the people who've dedicated their lives to it, but everyone's opinion is part of the conversation, and we can. And the things that divide us don't need to separate us. The things that the differences that we believe aren't there to motivate us to be in our own separate groups, but to cross-pollinate ideas. I think the First Amendment challenges us to do that.
And of course, I really respect people. They put down the Doritos, they get off the couch, and they go out and speak on the street.
It's very difficult. It's very scary.
Patrick Henry said, "I may not agree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it."
Yes. Yep.
I would step in if some police were hassling some Hebrew Israelites. I'd step in. Even though I don't agree with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and another thing is the exploration of where the line is, because a lot of people think the line's way back here, that we can't even that it isn't correct to get out in the street and that's sort of over the line, and it's not. The line is harassment, right? The line is physical abuse. And so I do like to yell in the street. I like to yell, and when people say don't do that, why? What is the purpose of not doing it? That's how we got into this position of not understanding each other, is certain things are not allowed.